Understanding Shame, Psychology and Philosophy of Self-Loathing. Dear viewer, let's talk about shedding the shackles of shame while delving into a profound exploration in psychology and philosophy. Shame is the silent spectre that slinks into the soul, wraps its tendrils around self-worth, and whispers tales of inadequacy. You are defective. It is more than an emotion. Shame is a full-body experience, a visceral punch to the gut, a heat that rises uninvited to the cheeks, a voice that hisses of unworthiness in the quietest hours. Unlike guilt, which says, "I did something bad," shame sneers, "I am bad." In this video, dear viewer, we will traverse the vast terrain of shame, from its psychological roots in childhood to its philosophical implications in our search for meaning. We will examine how shame shapes identity, relationships, and even societies, while also exploring pathways to liberation. Drawing from psychology's clinical insights and philosophy's timeless wisdom, we will illuminate how shame can be both our prison and, when understood, our emancipation. Warning: this video may contain traces of pretentious vocabulary, meandering metaphors, and intentional alliteration. Part 1: Nuances, Neurology, and History. What is the difference between shame, guilt, humiliation, and embarrassment? Shame is an internal feeling of inadequacy or unworthiness, and is often related to perfectionism. It stems from a belief that one has failed to meet personal or societal expectations. Shame can be deeply personal and persistent, leading to feelings of self-loathing and isolation. As previously stated, guilt is linked to actions rather than identity. It arises when someone recognizes that they have done something wrong or hurtful. Unlike shame, guilt can be constructive. It motivates people to make amends and change their behavior. Humiliation is more external. It occurs when someone is made to feel small or degraded by others. Unlike shame, which can be self-imposed, humiliation is often inflicted by another person or group. It can be deeply painful and may provoke anger or a desire for retaliation. Embarrassment is the least intense of the four. It's a temporary feeling of discomfort that arises when one is caught in an awkward or socially inappropriate situation. Unlike shame, guilt, or humiliation, embarrassment is often fleeting and can even turn into laughter once the moment passes. Neurology of neglect: how shame warps the brain. Shame does more than bruise the ego. It rewires the brain. Studies in neuroscience reveal that shame activates the limbic system, particularly the amygdala, which is the brain's emotional command center, responsible for processing fear and threat responses. When overwhelmed by shame, this primitive part of the brain hijacks rational thought, plunging the individual into a state of psychological paralysis, fight or flight. Moreover, chronic shame disrupts the prefrontal cortex, impairing problem-solving, emotional regulation, and self-compassion. Over time, repeated encounters with shame can create entrenched neural pathways, making self-criticism the default mode of thinking. Historical examples of shame. Shame has played a pivotal role in shaping history, influencing personal lives, cultural movements, and even political landscapes. Here are some notable examples. Joan of Arc's trial in 1431. Charged with heresy, Joan of Arc was forced to wear a shame cap before execution. This shows how institutional shame is weaponized to break a person's spirit. She briefly recanted under pressure. The Holocaust, the collective shame and guilt felt by many Germans in the aftermath of World War II and the atrocities of the Holocaust, is a profound example of shame's impact on a national scale. The Watergate scandal. Richard Nixon's resignation following the Watergate scandal is a prime example of shame's impact on leadership. The exposure of corruption led to national disgrace, forcing Nixon to step down to avoid further derision. Lance Armstrong's doping scandal, once celebrated as a cycling legend, Armstrong's admission to using performance-enhancing drugs led to widespread disgrace. His fall from grace illustrates how shame can dismantle reputations built over decades. The Me Too movement. This global movement exposed systemic sexual harassment and assault, forcing perpetrators to confront public shame. Many high-profile figures, such as film producer Harvey Weinstein, faced career-ending consequences and even jail time as survivors spoke out, demonstrating how shame can drive social change. Body shame and eating disorders. Societal pressures and unrealistic beauty standards contribute to widespread body shame, which can be a significant factor in the development of eating disorders and negative body image. The feeling of not measuring up to idealized images can lead to intense self-loathing and harmful behaviors. Princess Diana's public struggles. Diana, Princess of Wales, faced intense scrutiny and shame from both the royal family and the media. Her openness about personal struggles, including her battle with bulimia, helped destigmatize issues of mental health and shame. Part 2. The Many Faces of Shame. Psychology's lens. In the psyche's own shadows, shame can haunt you for years, whether the shame originates with childhood sexual abuse, domestic violence, or another kind of abuse or neglect where the survivor wants to hide from public scrutiny. It can be an insidious part of us, sabotaging us every step of the way. Carl Jung once said, "Shame is a soul-eating emotion." Sigmund Freud, the pioneer of psychoanalysis, first mapped shame as a relic of early psychosexual development. In his framework, shame emerges from the clash between primal instincts and societal repression, particularly during the anal stage of childhood, when toddlers first encounter boundaries around bodily autonomy. A parent's sharp, "Don't touch that," or "That's dirty," plants the earliest seeds of shame, an association between natural impulses and wrongdoing. Erik Erikson expanded this idea in his theory of psychosocial development, identifying shame as the dark counterpart to autonomy. When a child's early attempts at independence are met with excessive criticism or control, the result is not healthy self-assurance, but a lingering sense of inadequacy. "Better not try," whispers shame, "or you'll only fail again." In John Bradshaw's book, Healing the Shame That Binds You, he says, if our primary caregivers are shame-based, they will act shameless and pass their toxic shame onto us. Trap of the Broken Mirror, Cognitive Distortions. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, reveals shame as a hall of mirrors, each reflection warped by irrational beliefs. These distortions magnify flaws and minimize worth, trapping individuals in cycles of self-condemnation. Common shame-inducing thought patterns include, "I must be perfect to be loved. If people knew the real me, they would reject me. My mistakes define my entire being." These cognitive traps transform minor missteps into existential indictments. A single professional setback becomes proof of inherent incompetence, or a romantic rejection morphs into evidence of unlovability. Shame shackles the soul in a prison of perceived rather than actual perils. Wound of disconnection, attachment theory. According to John Bradshaw, we cannot heal what we cannot feel. So without recovery, our toxic shame gets carried for generations. John Bowlby's attachment theory casts shame as the scar of love withheld. When a child's emotional needs are met with dismissal or contempt, the child internalizes the belief that their very desires are shameful. "Don't cry. Stop being so sensitive. You're too much." These messages teach that vulnerability is dangerous and neediness is repulsive. In adulthood, This manifests as a deep-seated fear of abandonment. Relationships become minefields. Every conflict or criticism reignites the old terror. See, you're not good enough to be loved. Shame is the cracked foundation of a house built on conditional love. No matter how beautiful the structure is, it falls apart at the slightest storm. Part 3. Philosophy's sword, cutting through shame's illusions. Some of history's top philosophers weigh in on the feelings of shame. Let us dig in, shall we? Aristotle's double-edged virtue. Aristotle viewed shame as a semi-virtue, which was useful for the young, who lack fully developed moral reasoning. In his work, Rhetoric, he describes shame as the fear of disrepute, arguing that it can prevent morally reprehensible behavior. A blush of shame might steer a youth away from dishonorable acts, but for the mature adult, excessive shame becomes a hindrance. The virtuous person, Aristotle argued, should act from wisdom, not fear of disgrace. Sartre's gaze, the prison of the other. Jean-Paul Sartre captured shame's existential sting in Being and Nothingness, describing shame as arising when one becomes conscious of being judged. His famous keyhole example illustrates this. When caught peering through a keyhole, one does not merely regret the act, one feels seen, reduced to an object in another's gaze. Shame, then, is the horror of being defined by external judgment. So then, overcoming shame requires internal autonomy, which is the ability to separate personal values from societal expectations and cultivate self-definition. Nietzsche's rebellion, fight the control. Friedrich Nietzsche scorned shame as a tool of control. It was a leash tightened by religious and societal moralists, weaponizing shame to subjugate individuals, forcing them into predefined roles and expectations. His solution? Self-overcoming. The Übermensch, Overman, discards inherited values, forging their own standards. To Nietzsche, shame is the chains of slave morality. True freedom lies in laughing at the crowd's vocal raspberries. Nussbaum's justice, shame as social weapon. Philosopher Martha Nussbaum dissects shame's darker societal role, which is its use in enforcing conformity. From body shaming to xenophobia, societies weaponize shame to police normalcy. Her solution? Replace shame with justice and other systems that uplift rather than exclude. Part 4. The alchemy of healing. Now you may ask, how does one heal from internalized shame? Let's take a look, dear viewer. The Stoic's shield. It is Stoicism that teaches us while we cannot control external events, we can control our internal interpretations. A mistake is data and not damnation. Epictetus, born a slave, knew shame was a tyrant only if obeyed. When shame whispers its condemnation, ask it, is this thought useful? Is it true? The Buddhist's mirror. Now, dear viewer, Buddhism sees shame as attachment to a false, fixed self. Meditation reveals the truth. You are not your shortcomings. Like a reflection in water, the self that shame attacks is fleeting. To observe without judgment, to see the storm clouds of "I am not enough" drift by without letting them eclipse the sun, is to disarm shame's tyranny. Presence is power. So in other words, shame is the storm, and mindfulness is the sky that watches, unfazed. Antidote. The path to shame liberation. This antidote is not about eradicating shame entirely. After all, its presence can sometimes serve as a psychological guidepost, but the process is rather about loosening shame's grip. Psychologist Paul Gilbert offers a potent remedy: self-compassion. Imagine extending to yourself the same kindness you would offer a suffering friend. Gentle, patient, free of judgment. Research shows that self-compassion disrupts shame's cycle, replacing self-flagellation with constructive growth. Meanwhile, Professor Brené Brown's shame resilience theory, SRT, plus work on vulnerability, reveals shame's kryptonite, exposure. When shame is dragged into the light of empathy, spoken aloud to a trusted friend or therapist, it loses its power. Brené Brown stated, "Shame cannot survive being spoken. It cannot tolerate having words wrapped around it. What it craves is secrecy, silence, and judgment." Author Anne Voskamp once said, "Shame dies when stories are told in safe places." Reframing the self-story. Shame doesn't whisper truths, it hisses fiction. It spins Gothic tales of inadequacy, binding us to narratives of failure and fear etched into our psyche. But these stories are not scripture chiseled into stone. They are drafts, penned in the ink of old wounds and others' expectations. To wield the pen ourselves, to revise, reclaim, and rewrite, is to dissolve shame. Defying the architects of shame. Society is a relentless sculptor, attempting to chisel us into shapes that fit its narrative, including perfect bodies, flawless careers, seamless lives. But philosophy wields the hammer. Who decided these were holy? Shame is not a natural law. It is a construct cobbled together from outdated blueprints. To question its foundations is to reduce its cathedral to rubble. Unlearn the lies. Rebuild on your own truths. So, dear viewer, shame is a cage, but its lock responds to critical thought. Pick it. The shackles of shame removed. Author Anna Quindlen once said, "The thing that is really hard and really amazing is giving up on being perfect and beginning the work of becoming yourself." Shame is not a life sentence. Psychology offers the tools to dismantle its lies, and philosophy offers the wisdom to see beyond them. Whether through therapy's slow excavation or through Nietzsche's fiery Übermensch, liberation begins when we refuse to listen to the invisible, demeaning, internalized voice of shame, and listen instead to our compassionate selves.